Imagine a life defined by the weight of things you can never own. For 10 years, Philip Johnson woke up in the humid air of Jacksonville, Florida, put on a polyester uniform, and spent his days in a rolling steel fortress. Inside that truck, he was surrounded by more liquid wealth than most small towns see in a generation. He hauled millions of dollars in crisp, non-sequential bills, yet his own pockets were often empty. At $7 an hour, Johnson wasn't just a worker. He was a human paradox, a guardian of a fortune he couldn't touch, working a job that offered no health insurance, no dental plan, and no future. In the quiet, air-conditioned cabin of a Loomis Fargo armored car, a slow-burning resentment began to fester. It wasn't a flash of anger, but a cold, calculated realization. The system he served didn't value him, so he would value himself at exactly $18.8 million. Philip Johnson was the invisible man of the workplace. He was the guy who stayed in the background, the one who didn't join the office football pools or go out for drinks after a grueling shift. To his coworkers, he was just a quiet, somewhat awkward presence. But behind that unremarkable facade was a mind that had been operating on a 5-year tactical clock. Starting in 1992, Johnson began a meticulous process of self-deletion. He didn't just plan a robbery. He planned a reincarnation. He lived with roommates not because he needed the company, but because he needed their identities. He quietly harvested their birth certificates, social security numbers, and driver's licenses, building a library of ghost personas like Roger Lauder. While he was hauling cash for Loomis Fargo, he was simultaneously constructing a digital and paper labyrinth that would make him untraceable the moment he stepped out of his uniform. The date he chose was March 29, 1997, the eve of Easter Sunday. It was a masterpiece of timing. Holiday weekends meant that retail spending was at a seasonal peak, and the armored trucks would be returning to the warehouse, bursting with the day's receipts. It also meant that the next day was a holiday, a time when the world slowed down, giving him a massive head start before the sirens started wailing. As the sun began to set over Jacksonville, Johnson's truck backed into the Loomis Fargo warehouse. The routine was second nature: the check-in, the security clearance, the heavy doors of the vault yawning open to receive the day's harvest. But on this night, Philip Johnson decided he was done with routines. He waited for the facility to thin out, and when the moment was right, the quiet guy produced a weapon and shattered the reality of everyone in the room. The heist wasn't a frantic grab and dash. It was a grueling 2-hour manual labor project. Johnson was a professional, even in the middle of a crime. He backed an unmarked company van into the vault area and began the back-breaking work of moving half a ton of currency. He was selective, ignoring the low-value 1s and 5s and the heavy bags of coin that would slow him down. He wanted the high-value bills, the clean money that could be spent anywhere in the world without raising an eyebrow. As he stacked millions of dollars into the van, his coworkers, Dan Smith and Terry Brown, lay shackled on the floor, watching their mundane colleague transform into the most successful thief in the country. Johnson didn't just take the money. He took the surveillance tapes in his own personnel file, effectively erasing the fill that Loomis Fargo thought they knew. But as he drove away from the warehouse, the mastermind began to crack, revealing a man who was deeply, perhaps dangerously, lonely. He drove the van to his own home, a move that defied every rule of criminal logic, to leave Terry Brown handcuffed in a closet. Before he left, he didn't give a cold, cinematic threat. Instead, he delivered a rambling, emotional monologue about how much he hated the company and how he felt he had been treated like a nobody. The most surreal moment, however, occurred during the long drive north toward the Blue Ridge Mountains with his other hostage, Dan Smith. In the dark silence of the van, surrounded by $18 million, Johnson didn't talk about his getaway. He asked Smith why they hadn't been friends. He wanted to know why no one ever asked him to go get pizza or a beer. In that moment, the heist ceased to be about money and revealed itself as a desperate, violent cry for the social connection he had never been able to forge. By dawn, Johnson reached the wooded outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. He forced Smith to handcuff himself to a tree, but even here, the bizarre nature of his character shone through. He left Smith with warm clothes and a promise that he would notify the police of his location in 2 days. He then vanished into the morning mist, leaving behind a trail of confusion that would stump the FBI for months. When the vault was finally opened in Jacksonville, the scale of the theft sent shockwaves through the industry. The FBI took over the case immediately, but they were hunting a shadow. They searched his home and found the chaotic remains of a man who was clearly brilliant but deeply troubled. They found evidence of his many aliases, but they had no idea which one he was currently using or which direction he had fled. For 5 months, the trail grew cold. The FBI canvassed hundreds of storage units across the Southeast, even visiting the mountain home mini storage facility where Johnson had actually hidden the money. In one of the great what-ifs of true crime history, the agents showed photos of Johnson to the staff. But because he had used a clever alias and presented himself so unremarkably, no one recognized him. The agents walked away, literally standing within yards of the largest cash haul in U.S. history. Meanwhile, Johnson was in Mexico, living in a boarding house, surrounded by millions he couldn't easily spend and a loneliness that followed him across the border. He had the rich retirement he had dreamed of, but his only companions were a book on depression and a self-help tape about why he was still single. The end came not with a shootout, but with a bus ticket. In August 1997, a man with a messy beard and a palpable sense of anxiety stepped off a bus at the Gateway International Bridge in Brownsville, Texas. He was trying to get back into the United States. When he handed over a North Carolina driver's license in the name of Roger Lauder, Customs Inspector Virginia Rodriguez felt a prickle of intuition. It wasn't just that he looked like a wanted poster. It was that he didn't seem to belong in his own skin. When she ran the name, the computer screen flashed red with an alert that would end the greatest run in heist history. Philip Johnson was arrested with $10,000 in his pocket and a nervous look on his face. The brilliant plan fell apart because of a simple yellow receipt. The FBI found the storage locker ticket in Johnson's Mexican boarding house, leading them directly to the North Carolina unit where $18.8 million was sitting, untouched, and waiting. Johnson was eventually sentenced to 25 years in a maximum security federal prison. The ultimate irony of his life is that he is now forced to pay back the remaining $59,000 of the stolen funds through prison labor, earning a wage far, far lower than the $7 an hour he originally went to war against. He is still working for the system, still hauling weight, but now the bars are real and the millions are gone. Philip Johnson had the intelligence to bypass state-of-the-art security and the discipline to hide for half a year in a foreign country. He had successfully vanished and reached a place where he could have lived out his days in total anonymity and luxury. So, the question that haunts the archives of this case remains: why did he get back on that bus? Why would a man who had won the ultimate game of cat and mouse decide to walk right back into the arms of the people hunting him? What was the one thing waiting for him back in America that was worth more to him than $18 million and his own freedom?